So this video is part 2 of the analysis of the Gungaku manuals. This was originally going to be one long video, but I decided to break the first part down. The first part discusses the complex versus simpler mistake that is made. And this second video, is going to discuss the second point, which is analyzing the writing itself for additional information. And we're going to call this breaking down the writing for the author, the date, etc., etc., etc. So this is where reading the manuals, and I put that in quotes because we read manuals two different ways. Sometimes we read manuals we read manuals for the information contained in the manuals, but we can also read the manuals to analyze the writing itself. And that's what we're talking about here. So it goes from simple hobby or curiosity or learning what is being said to an actual science, an actual academic method with rules, the analysis of the writing itself. Not what is written, but how it is written. With enough knowledge, experience, and established procedures, a person can analyze the written material and figure out a significant amount of information. Again, not from what is written, but from how it is written. With this information, we can receive further information with the information that we get from analyzing how it's written, it opens doorways to new information and new streams of thought that helps us date the document, identify the author or potentially authors, helps align the copy of the document into a sequence with other transcriptions. This is where you get which copy came first. You don't decide which copy comes first by which is simpler. You figure out which copy comes first by using these established academic procedures to analyze the writing and legitimately figure out the sequence of documents. And then we can also obtain other useful bits of information as well. So over the next few panels, what I'm going to do is introduce a few generic examples and try to convey some of the basics of this methodology. We're going to focus primarily on the voice of the author, which is like a profile of the author, and then dating various aspects of the passages for insights into the passage. So that is the mechanical analysis of the writing itself to learn more about the writing itself. Again, it's not about what's written, it's about how it's written. How it's written gives us information as well. Now, on a personal note, I have to say that these methods, they start very simple, but they can become quite complex and in-depth. For the sake of this video, we're going to keep it very simple. But I have to say, as a serious historian, anyone who wants to seriously study and examine and dig their teeth into these Gungaku manuals, they have to involve themselves, or at least have associates who are involved with such examinations of the documents. Even if we do not like the outcomes of the examinations, we should be obliged to respect and follow these procedures. So let me share with you a personal sort of aspect there's a particular Kusunoki document that I and other Kusunoki researchers are 99% certain dates to the 1400s. But the problem is, the oldest copy that we can find is from 1622. And we would love to say this document is transcribed in 1622, but the problem is when the person transcribed it, they added some stuff and they edited a little bit of stuff, and so the copy that we have from 1622 is not a pure transcription of the document that we're certain dates back to the 1400s. So we, as serious academics, have to say the document is from 1622, even though we are fairly certain that it comes from the 1400s. But until we can find a physical copy that predates the 1622 version, we are stuck with a 1622 version which we know has edits. Now, we know exactly where it's edited, so you would think we would say it's from 1400, but still, for the sake of academics, to be straightforward and to follow the procedure, we have to say it's from 1622, even though we're fairly certain it's from 1400s. So when you look at your screen, you'll see in red the voice of the author, or this is building a profile of the person who's talking or who's writing. So example number 1 in orange and example number 2 in blue, both of these say the exact same thing, but they have a different voice, meaning that the profile is different. This is not the same person talking. This is two different people. Number 1 is less formal, uses contractions, has a different vocabulary than number 2, uses first person, first person I, addressing second person plural, you all. Number 2 is more formal, uses no contractions, has a different vocabulary from number 1, and uses first person I, addressing second person singular, you. So this is two different voices and would be considered two different authors. So in further exploring this aspect, because the voice that we're talking about is written material, we have to actually look at physically how it's written. Now this normally would involve a lot of complex factors such as penmanship, kanji selection, grammar, kana uses, contractions, etc. But for the sake of this example, we're just going to use English. So you'll see on your screen number 1 and 2. 1 is in orange, 2 is in green, and you'll see again it says the same thing and it looks like it's the same thing, but you have to pay attention to the fact that the spelling is uniquely different. And where the contractions are is different, right? So when you're talking about consistent patterns in a writing, what you're looking for is a profile of the individual writing. So you're looking at how do they spell it, how do they use contractions, things like that, and that stuff matters. Because it lets you know, it builds a profile of the author, that you can track this author by how they write, how they spell, how they contract. So as you say, both examples say the same thing, but the spelling is uniquely different, and we can mark these two as two different voices or as two different authors and in red, especially if the pattern continues through the document. If there's a variation in spelling and contractions once or twice, then that's a very gray area. It's debatable. But if there's a clear pattern of alternation of these spelling and contraction patterns, then it's a highly suggestive that we're looking at two different authors. So as I said previously, it gets far more complicated, but it's spelling of words, use of contractions, grammatical shorthands, perspective of the author, first, second, or third person, perspective of the reader. Is the author referring to themselves as an I and to the reader as a you singular? Or is it I to you plural? Or is it we to you singular? Or we to you plural? Or, is it the we an inclusive we, or is it an exclusive we? These things make a difference, and all of these minor details, they add up into a profile, a psychological profile, a voice of the author. And when you study the text, you can find that there might be multiple authors of a text if there's multiple voices, multiple profiles within the document. Again, such things as verb tenses, right? So while this can change to the document, most authors have a particular pattern that emerge. Something like they use the present tense 70% of the time, 20% of the time it's past tense, 10% of the time it's future tense. So even the tense of their verbs makes a ratio that helps develop if this is the same person writing consistently through the document. So again, there's so many different factors that have to be looked for and then layered to come up with a profile, a voice of the author. And again, this is how you can spot multiple authors in one document. These profiles do not just work on a single document either. If the author has gone over multiple documents, you can use multiple documents to create this profile of the author. And then you can use this profile when analyzing other works that are allegedly done by the author. And so, for example, this is how we can debunk some of the Kusunoki forgeries that are written in the mid-1600s and attributed to Masashige. We know he didn't write them. The profile of the author who wrote the forged document is completely mismatched to the documents of the Kaden. And we also have other historical evidence as to when those documents are actually written. So we know that it's not written by Kusunoki Masashige for two reasons. One, the voice of the author doesn't match at all. And two, we end up finding out through historical research and investigation who actually wrote the document. So we hit it from a psychological profile perspective and then from just a historical investigation perspective. This is also how we can compare and contrast documents that have, kuden marks or addendums, and we see if these additions match the voice of the original author or if it's a voice of a different person. Now, usually, if the kuden notes or the addendums or the annotations are added to a document, it's usually marked as an addendum or as a later addition. But just in case, if it's not marked, you can compare the voice of the whoever wrote the original section with the voice of whoever wrote these addendums, and if the voice doesn't match, then you can usually say, okay, these were not written by the original author.